If you want to start or scale your property development business to 8 figures and beyond, then you're in the right place. This is the Property XPerts Podcast with Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins, two serial entrepreneurs bringing weekly insights from our award-winning businesses. In these podcasts, you'll learn how we found, funded and delivered over £80 million worth of property in the last 6 years, with templates you can use, deal analysis and deep dive discussions that will help you build your businesses successfully. We hope you'll enjoy.
Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining if you've joined us before. I believe, have one of the most information-dense episodes this year so far in this episode, so super excited to get cracking with it. If you haven't followed Ben or myself even followed this channel, we're aspiring, budding entrepreneurs, feel a bit haggard and old now, but we've been doing this for almost a decade now, and our goal and mission is to deliver 1,000 homes in the UK and £1 billion worth of property. We also have some live investments. We've actually been well received in people contacting us over the last few weeks. We like to get our investor relations all sort of signed, sealed and delivered and ready to be poised at opportunities that we bring through. We bring through quite a few opportunities per year. So if you are interested in opening conversation, please DM us or comment and we would love to start that conversation off with you. So straight into the agenda. If you're listening, it's the 18th of July. And yeah, as I mentioned, I'm excited to get cracking with today because there's some real, I would say, important things that you need to be thinking of, that we're thinking of, and will hopefully set you up for success in the second half of this year and so on. So starting off, we're going to be talking about the largest risks in property in the current market, which is a very big topic. There's many risks that are wrapped up in property development, and we'll be going to be delving and discussing our views, what we're seeing, and how you could potentially combat those risks to put yourself in the best position. We'll be talking about how we work out profit per plot in every of our developments and how we calculate that figure to understand which units are profitable more so than potentially others. We'll be talking about the second phase of St Andrew's Court, our largest deal to date, and we'll be going into detail around what phase 2 is, potentially why we phased it, and where that deal is at a snapshot. The images actually look really cool. We'll be talking about rekindling relationships. If you've not engaged with potential business relationships for a few years, how you could potentially strengthen that for when you do come back around, it's a stronger relationship. We had a final inspection of Marlow. We'll be letting you know how we got on after Ben's few rants about building control and various areas of tying off the deals. I feel like the last month feels like the longest in developments. We've got a new deal under offer in Central Suites. We'll be sharing what's cool about that. Quite a fun fact about that project. So we'll be sharing that as well. We'll be touching on the risks, but we'll be talking about what we're seeing. Are we seeing sales? We've got quite a lot of stock coming to market this year. There's certain things and techniques that we've done to try and get our sales out the door, and we'll be sharing where we're seeing the market at. We'll be sharing the value of compounding. I did a mentoring session this week where I sort of showed the incremental valuation of compounding value. So I'll be comparing buy-to-let rental properties against flipping properties and showing the wealth and value that can be generated over a 10-year schedule. I'll be talking about Yaytext, which is a cool platform, which is a bit of a hack if you're a LinkedIn user. And then we'll be going last topic before we go into Q&A, selecting a sales price, which could give you double the chances to sell a property just by pricing it right. So a jam-packed episode and a lot. I feel like, there's going to be a lot of value in this episode, so definitely hang around to the end. Let's kick us off. Ben, I thought we hadn't talked about the market, what we're seeing, lots of changes, inflation, budget coming up, which kind of killed the market in a few years. I've put on here an image that I actually found online, which I think analyzes the risks at the moment. There's the obvious risks like getting out of the ground and contractors going bust, but I wanted to talk about more the market, what we're seeing, what we're trying to do to combat the market, because we haven't seen any rate drops, finance costs haven't changed so much, compliance is being a pain in the arse, delays are coming thick and fast, and we're also going to touch on sales later on-ish, so we can sort of touch on it in a market macro capacity, but then our micro capacity later. So, I mean, I'm hearing doom and gloom from a lot of estate agents in both residential and commercial sales. which could be seen as an opportunity, but if you're trying to exit, it's the opposite. What are you feeling?
I like that graphic, to be fair, because there's all of those 5 key factors. So for those that aren't tuning in by video, we've got market risk, financial risk, construction risk, environmental risk, and legal and regulatory risk, and they all play a massive part. I think given the areas of the business that I work in, I'm seeing the regulatory risks as massive. The red tape that's been brought in, the Building Safety Act people are starting to see the massive knock-on effect that has, even on smaller projects, in terms of delays to building regulations, sign off, and the process is just so much more. I had a big rant about it last week in terms of having to supply all of the documentation and certificates to building control before they would even send out somebody for the final inspection, which just wastes probably at least 3 weeks of time, which it's just part of that unpragmatic approach that's come from the top down, from bureaucracy at the top end of the scale, not necessarily understanding the process or what's practical in the construction industry. It all sounds fantastic when you think about it in a board meeting and blue sky thinking around things, but when it comes to the practicality of getting things done on site, there's so many variables that it's one change to the process like that can have a massive knock-on effect. And if we're talking about a 3-week delay in getting something signed off, those 3 weeks to us on that particular site cost us about 20 grand. It's not small money, and this is a relatively sizable project. Just imagine that you are working on a 100-unit scheme, and you've got a long sales tail where you're holding finance costs. This regulatory approach is just killing people. And I know that from a bigger scale, I still speak to a lot of people at the Berkeley Group, and know how difficult it's been going through the high risk building process for the Building Safety Act. To the point where there's 12-month delays in actually getting started on site, because with high risk buildings, you cannot start works until absolutely everything is signed off, which has its pros, but to be honest, has more cons, I would say, than the pros. The health and safety is obviously really paramount and important, but nothing's getting done. The building control officers or building approved inspectors, whatever they're called nowadays, can't I remember? Building safety approvers, I can't remember. They are absolutely inundated. They don't fully understand the process. It's still being sort of reworked and understood. So I do see huge amounts of regulatory risk coming in. That also has a knock-on effect with everything, because ultimately margins are getting squeezed for developers. They can't pay as much for sites, and vendor expectations are still sky high. So nothing's getting done, and we're seeing that. I haven't seen the exact figures, but the amount of new starts on site are, I think, at the lowest they've been in 20 odd years. The planning process is causing delays. The amount of planning applications that have been approved over the last year are at record lows. So it's just the government and the council, the government want to speed things up, but all this bureaucracy and regulatory issues are slowing things down. And I'm sort of hopeful that is a blip when people start to get used to all of this, but I just don't think it is. I just think it will continue and continue and continue, and we're spiraling downward and downward and downward, and nothing's getting built fast enough because of all this red tape that they're trying to bring in. So yeah, that's my take from a regulatory perspective.
I think it was actually in the Trump documentary that's 15 something years of he's talking about 15 years ago, and he talks about in building his empire in New York, which is kind of where Trump really made his mark. He got out of development in New York because of the like legislation compliance and all of the red tape that was being built around it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're going through that cycle at the moment, like where you kind of need a bit of a break, where it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts, and then the point where we go, this is getting ridiculous now. No one's developing, housing supplies aren't. So the government need to reinstitute easing on it. And I feel like we're kind of, I don't know whether at the worst part of it or the hike of it or the plateau at the top, but I kind of feel it needs that easement again. And I am starting to hear mutters in the market about like the actual environmental and ecology. Like, do we actually give a monkeys about bats? Do we actually care about badgers? And things. So I think ecology could be a nice, easy way that might get some easing. But I agree with you with sort of fire and building control. It is getting significantly worse. I mean, I've got an issue at the moment with fire on one of our HMOs where we fitted FD30 doors, and because we cut them down so much, we've got to take them all off, replace them with solid doors, which are not FD30, and then paint them with intermittent paint. Now, in my opinion, I'd rather paint a fire door with intermittent paint than paint a regular door. So it just doesn't make no one's willing to sign that off. So I've now got to throw all of these fire doors away and put in standard pine shitty old doors.
Nightmare.
So it's just the point when lack of pragmatism is the problem of compliance. I completely agree with that.
I've got the rant that I did go on a couple of weeks ago about building control sign off and stuff has gone, we've never gone viral, but for us, going viral is 20,000, views. And that video did go, 20,000 views plus on TikTok. And I've been reviewing loads of the comments because it's quite interesting. And I know people see TikTok as being for young people, but there are huge amounts of older building control inspectors that have commented on this video. Building control have been difficult and have become steadily worse. I've been a builder for 52 years, working with building control. I've got people in here that have said, they've been a building control officer for a local council for the last 30 years, and they've had to jump ship because they just can't deal with the bureaucracy and the process nowadays. I've had probably, 5 to 10 kind of comments of that type of person where they're in the industry, they've been a building control body for the last 30 years of their life, and they're just having to look elsewhere for different jobs. So not only are we sort of having this red tape, but the people that are overseeing that process are jumping ship to different things, and we're losing that experience and that understanding and the losing that pragmatism of if you've got a really experienced person that's probably talking to you, Jack, about that issue, they're more likely to be pragmatic about the approach than somebody that's 25 years old as a graduate that doesn't really understand other than looking at the word for word guidance that they need to follow, because they don't understand any potential alternative solutions. They are just computer says no, this is what the regulations say, and tough shit type thing. So I do think it's a really challenging times. We'll come on to the sales process a little bit later. Construction risks are also massive in terms of labour shortages and skilled labour moving back overseas, and we're seeing that, have seen that over the last couple of years. So I don't know which one I would pick to be the largest risk. To be honest, I think they all have a massive impact, and it's just almost like a clusterfuck of combination of all of them.
Yeah, I think just to go through for our listeners to try and give you, what we don't want to do is just moan about stuff and you just sit there knowing that we've moaned about it. I'd rather be solution providing if we can. So let's go through the market risk is something that is completely out of your control. There's ways that you can de-risk that. So stress test your projects. Typically stress testing is losing gross development value, duration of project overrunning, cost of project overrunning. So stress test that. We've actually got a tool that can do that. So if you do want to see that, comment stress test. Equally, having multiple exits. We talked about this before. If you can refinance most of the site or the whole site just to hold tide, if the market is a bit shot away, rents are quite well supported at the moment, and you will need to stress test the finance cost to do that, which then brings me into financial risks. I believe that being smart with how you're structured. I was on a call with mentoring someone this morning, actually, talking about bridging a site just to get cheaper finance. And I was like, I don't think that that's worthwhile, because then you've got all the fees in and all the fees out. And financial risk is time. Time is the biggest concern for me around finance, because the longer projects take, the more they cost. The suppression of your margin, the higher the risk is. Ben's talks about construction. We've actually done multiple episodes on construction and making sure that your pre-qualification questionnaires are good, making sure the contractors you're bringing in to tender are the right contractors, and making sure you're picking the right contractor is inevitably really, really important. I don't know what episode it is, but we can whack it in the comments so that you can pull up that episode on instructing contractors and making sure that your construction is as low risk as possible. And then Ben's kind of already talked about environmental and legal, but I kind of feel that the only solution to do that is you just got to plan a lot of time and budget and be really on their cases and pushing consultants, bringing in your own consultants that's representing you to combat the officers and the building control officers and various people that are saying this needs to be done this way. And you can actually sometimes pave the way on a negotiation. But like Ben said, it's super difficult. So
I do have two kind of top tips in terms of what's going to be happening over the next couple of years. One of them is already happening, and I would suggest finding yourself a good number of fire engineers, fire consultants. Almost every project now will have to have some sort of third-party advice from a fire consultant. So make sure that you are befriending them. They are few and far between, and if you find some good ones, then pass them over. We work with a number of good ones, which I want to expand upon. Because they're just going to be inundated with work, and it will come to the point. I mean, even now we've had people refuse to even quote because they're so busy on certain projects. So fire engineer is one of them. And the biggest environmental risk coming up over the next year or so is the future home standards, which I've mentioned briefly before. That is basically an enhancement on building control levels of insulation, air tightness, renewable technology, SAP and EPC type processes. So that is, to get a new home to satisfy the new future home standards. I think from what I recall doing a presentation on a couple of years ago, at that point, it was about a 31% increase on today's building control requirements. So if you imagine what you have to do even today to get building control from a thermal requirements and a renewable technology and an air tightness and all that sort of test perspective, the future home standards goes to the next level. So people won't start to see the pain of that until it fully comes in, next year or whenever it's coming in. But it keeps moving around in terms of the date. But when it does come in, that's going to be something else that people haven't factored into their budgets. They haven't added an extra 5-10% for the impact of that. It's going to squeeze their margin or take them into serious difficulty. They wouldn't have factored it into their offer price for buying the land in the first place. So they're already on a backward step because they've already bought the site. They're having to now abide by these new regulations. They haven't factored in that cost. Build costs are going to go up. Profit margin is going to get squeezed to the point where they wouldn't have probably done the scheme in the first place if they'd known about it. So yeah, those two things I think are definitely things to take away and find yourself a good SAP assessor, energy assessor, good architect that understands that process, and also a fire engineer. Cool. Anything else you want to say about that one?
No, I think we've covered off most points.
Yeah, I mean, let us know. What have we missed? What are you seeing as the biggest risks?
I mean, we could probably go on for hours about this.
Good,
but we're trying to talk about topical new risks or rising risks.
Yeah,
I personally feel like market change, financial risk, and compliance. We talk about planning and planning delays, but I think that's kind of been around for a while. It hasn't really changed. But I think those three are quite imperative ones to keep on top of, certainly.
Cool. This one's a bit techie, so bear with me. But we do a lot of projects where it's multi-unit, multi-phased, multi-development mix in terms of houses, flats, a bit of everything. And I wanted to talk about something that we're going through at the moment. Obviously, we're starting to sell units in our St Andrew's Court scheme in Thame. This is from an old example, and all these figures won't be finalised, but it gives you a good sense of what I'm trying to achieve here. So when you've got a phased scheme and you're selling numerous units, most developers will know that you don't make your money until you sell your final 20%. Ultimately, the first amount is going to go to your senior lender. You'll then got some mezzanine finance or some other investment coming in that you'll then pay off, and then your profit is effectively in that final 20%. So how do you calculate actually what each plot profit was? And when you do sell units individually and you're still going through that process where you're still got work in progress, interest rates interest kind of racking up, from an accounting perspective, you sort of need to know what the profitability of each project is. So that as you sell one property, what actually is the margin that is associated with that project, or flip reverse that, what is the costs associated with that particular property? Because if you've got a whole 10 unit scheme of £1 million, it might be that you just split that by 10 and you've got 100 grand per plot. But in our case, it's never as easy as that, because we've got houses, we've got flats, we've got different sized flats where the attributable costs associated with different flats is going to be different. I.e., this, for example, flat 3, flat 4, flat 5, flat 6, they're all different sizes. Flat 3 and flat 4 are 14% of the total square footage. Flat 5 is 17% of the total square footage. And flat 6 is 22% of the total square footage. So when I'm looking at costs, I need to apportion the costs in that percentage of total area. And that's typically what we'll do. So just to talk through this site, because it's got a good balance of different types of things, we've split our costs into 3 elements. We had a pair of new builds, which is these ones on the right-hand side. Some of you came to our site visit to this site a couple of summers ago. We finished it back in 2023. 2 new build houses in the car park, office conversion into 4 flats, and then some landscaping and external works. So we know the costs because we've got the contract value for the new houses. That's in this column. We've got the office conversion, and we know the costs associated with that work because, again, that formed part of a different JCT contract. And then you've also got the wider site costs that are associated with purchasing the property. All of the finance costs are held for all of the site, not necessarily held for just the houses or just the offices. You've probably got planning applications that are relating to the whole site, not just specific to the houses. All of that stuff goes into these 3 columns. So you've got everything relatable to the office conversion, everything relatable to the new houses, and then everything that is more site and jointly a joint cost compared to both of the 2 different types of schemes. So once you've got those 3 buckets, effectively, we then split down the sizes of each unit compared to the total square footage, because that is really the only way that you can apportion a percentage of costs against a total. So every cost is in this top section. A breakdown and a split of how each of those elements gets passed down to the plot is in this table. And then underneath it's at the moment we're working out the costs towards building one of these new houses. So as you can see on this, we've taken the individual construction costs associated with the houses, which was 460 grand. So £230,000 of that 460 is apportioned to one of the houses. And then as part of the site and joint costs, there's a total joint cost of £1.229 million. And then we've broken that down into the 15% of that floor area compared against the total is taken from that site joint cost. So 50% of the individual JCT contract goes towards the actual build costs. And then ultimately there is the best part of £170,000 that we can apportion from the site-wide costs to that individual plot, taking our total cost for that plot up to £405,000. So that's how we work it out. It's definitely something that you should get your accountant to be working on with you. We've massively improved the way that we calculate this, and our new accountant has helped us make it way more intelligent, because it has to be on some of our sites. So St Andrew's Court, there's commercial that we've kept, there's flats that we've already completed, there's phase 2, which we'll talk about later, there's site-wide costs that are associated with that, there's communal areas that aren't necessarily associated with all of the flats. There's different blocks, there's different communal areas, so it is way more complicated on some other sites. So we've been able to kind of streamline things. But as the sort of overarching thing that you need to take away from this is looking at your costs for the individual elements of the project, associating and apportioning a percentage of those costs to each unit, depending on the size of that unit. And then you can calculate the total cost that individual plot cost you within the scheme. Anything you think I've missed, Jack?
No, all good.
Cool.
Like you said, quite technical, but
yeah, hopefully it's
necessary. Yeah.
Useful to some people. And if you want to keep on top of those types of finances, then we use Xero, which is an accounting platform. If you use the bit.ly code on screen or the referral link down in the description, you can get 90% off for your first 6 months, which is I think about 200 quid saving or so. Cool. Big news this week, and you'd have heard me banging on about it for a while now. We have finally moved our commercial tenant out of their office in St Andrew's Court into their newly brand spanking newly refurbished office at the other side of the site, which frees up the space for us to start phase 2 of our St Andrew's Court scheme. So this was us yesterday on site with the builder, with a couple of other consultants, with James from P4HB, who is is providing all of the building materials for the site. And we did top to toe walk around, talking about logistics, where we're going to be putting skips, where's the scaffolding going to go, how do we get stairs up into the property from the scaffolding, when does that need to come in, how soon do they need stuff, what's the program. All of that was a site kickoff meeting yesterday, which I'm super excited about, because we should have been in back in March, April. Those sort of 3 or 4 months delays in terms of getting building control sign off and their office fit out completed, it could easily have cost us 150 grand. It's as simple as that. When you're holding quite a lot of debt on the site, it does, every delay like that costs you a fortune. So for me, getting in there, the guys will be in there today stripping out. We'll start to see the mess made, breaking the egg before making the omelette. Very, very excited. So you can see phase 1 in this top right hand image. That is now fully completed. We've sold and occupied 4 of those flats. And I'll come on to the sales in a little bit in terms of progress on that. This image on the left-hand side is the office that we're converting. So we're converting the ground, first and second floor, and also extending the roof zone with various dormers, inset balconies. I actually realized this is the latest one. Yeah, this is the latest one. Inset balconies, dormers, creating what is currently a very, very small office space into 2 penthouse 2 beds with external balconies, external terraces. So just to run you through the figures on this, we're going to be building this out for about £1.3 million. Gross development value is about £3.5 million. And ultimately we already own the land, but in terms of residual value of the site, we pegged it at around about 1.3 million. So 1.3 plus 1.3 is 2.6 million. So there should be the best part of 900 grand or so pre-finance profit on that one. So when we factored in the finance, I imagine we're probably down at about 600 grand in terms of a clear profit on that side of the scheme. So that's why we want to get going. We can't make any of that profit until we actually get the scheme finished and get all the units sold. So super excited to move that one on. Cool.
Rekindling relationship. So this is just a short one. So I actually, in the world of raising equity and raising finance, I got introduced to someone that's sort of a full stack broker, you could say. So debt lending, mezz lending, second charge, investment equity, all that sort of stuff. I recognized the name and I was like, I definitely know that name because it was quite a unique name. And I searched through my emails and realized that 5 years ago, we were having a conversation about the deal. If you are looking on the screen, you can see on the screen, which is our 7 flats and 7 offices in Spencer's Wood near Reading, which was a very early scheme that Ben and I did together. And coincidentally, this particular broker was working with us. We didn't end up getting the deal over the line, but this broker financial person was working with us. So just to sort of close off the sort of loop, I thought it would be very valuable to show him the outcome of the project, the success of the project and the proof of the project. And equally, this project actually won an award. So I sort of sent it over to him and said, have a look, see if this reminds you of anything. A little bit of sort of tongue in cheek there, but he was super complimentary of the work that we've done. And I think that's really important in a world where there's a lot of bluffing and social media presence, where it's all a lot of bullshit, really. There's, we've talked about people that appear to be doing loads online, and actually when you get down into the weeds, they're not doing a lot. So I wanted to share that exact case study that he will remember from 5 years ago, to show that we've done what we said we were going to do. It performed well, and we now still own half of that asset within our portfolio, and we've sold off some of the units in that too as well. So just to strengthen that relationship, which we don't have to speak every year, but when we do check in, bring back to the sort of original conversation, show what you've achieved in that time, is not really bragging if it's something that you actually deliver, and if you are a developer, I think that would be really useful. Another tip for other people as well is a lot of our mentees say, well, I've managed loads of projects, but they're not for myself. I mean, that's still experience, and you can still share that with people. You can talk about the projects that you are working on. The integral part that you have on those projects is better than no experience. So don't be afraid to sort of pick up the past and say what you've been up to, and even be transparent and say, we did well, we didn't do well, or whatever it may be. But I just thought I'd share that to try and improve business relationships with people that you might not have picked up the phone to in a little while.
Nice. Cool. If you want tips like that and to share knowledge, share experience, share database contacts with like-minded individuals, then maybe the XP Boardroom is good for you. We meet once a month with sort of 8 to 10 people, where Jack and I host the event. It's a chance to really go deep on your businesses, look at your goals and achievements over the preceding months and future months. Deal clinics, which often are, I would say, the most valuable pieces of time that we spend within the boardroom, where we generally go through three or four deals that people are looking at, talk about the constraints, the opportunities, the risks associated with it, and really go to detail on how kind of Jack and I would approach these types of sites. And we know that our attendees get huge value from it. So yeah, if you're interested in joining us for a monthly session for 4 hours, sometimes in face-to-face and sometimes via Zoom call, then reach out or drop Boardroom down below, and we can share more details with you. Likewise with the mentoring, we're super busy at the moment with the one-to-one stuff, and that is really a chance to go even deeper with your business and ask very, very specific questions. I've got a call after this recording with someone wanting to talk specifically about kind of planning and permit development on a specific site that they are currently working on, and that's the chance to go really deep and get some really valuable insight into answers and our experience.
Cool. Yeah, we have up to like 4 or 5 sessions a week now in mentoring.
4 to 5 sessions a week. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. We love it. Obviously, there's only 2 of us, so ultimately our time is quite precious. So yeah, if you're interested, get involved, reach out to us, because we are going to have to call it at some point in terms of how many we can take on. Final inspection at Marlow. We had the building control officer out on Wednesday, and all was good, which was great. So we have now got the sort of first 4. So we've got 4 of the 8 sold, exchanged, and the final inspection was just to get those 4 signed off. The reason why we didn't get the whole site signed off is that there's been a few delays with some doors being delivered and a stair that needs to go in. So ultimately, there's just bits and bobs that need to be finished on the other 4, and we can't wait for those to be done before getting the first 4 signed off. So this is called sort of a partial sign off, and it's not uncommon. There's always going to be complications where you can finish some of the site faster than you can finish everything, and you don't want to hold up those early finishes with the properties that have a few minor bits and bobs to finalize. So we've submitted all the relevant certificates to building control. Building control officer was okay with what he saw on the first floor flats. He's going to have to write up his report, submit that to his senior officer, and the senior officer is going to have to dot the I's and cross the T's. I'm confident now that we've submitted everything that they should need. So I'm not expecting any further requests, but I've said that many a time on St Andrew's Court, and that took took a long time to get that through. But ultimately, I think we're almost there now, which is great. We're hoping to early next week submit the 10-day completion notice to all of the buyers, and I'm hopeful that by next Friday we can actually complete on at least 2 or 3 of those 4. Cool. I mean, it's probably worth saying actually, when you submit that 10-day notice, the buyer has 10 days to complete, but ultimately by mutual agreement that can be sooner. The buyers of this rear unit here are chomping at the bit to get in. So I think as soon as we gave them the 10 days notice, they will probably say they want to complete the following day. So great news for us. It means that we're not spending an extra 10 days kind of holding interest, and we can actually pay down some of that debt and get it sold. So good news for a change from a building control perspective. Seems like we've made a bit of progress, and the site is looking really good. This was me there on site yesterday. The planting's gone in, the resin flooring has gone in. So this is a permeable resin. So basically, as soon as that gets rained on, the rain just dissipates into a sub base and dissipates into the ground. And it's looking sharp. We've got the bollards to go in with the lighting, external lighting. Need to trim back some of these neighbours' bushes. But it's looking really good. I'm super happy. We will get professional photos and a full clean done beginning of next week. And hopefully I can share some nice snaps with everyone with a show home that we've furnished and a couple of photos from just empty units. So this is something that we haven't done in the past in terms of doing professional photos of every single unit. Like, it's sort of, for me, I think having a record of how those units finished up, I think is really important. So with this one, we're going to have professional photos of absolutely every unit on site. If you get value from these podcasts, please rate us on Spotify, leave a review on Apple. I can see these trickling in now, which is amazing. Thank you so much. It really does mean a lot. But the biggest thing that we want you guys to do is share. Please just share it with anyone you think might get value. Any business owners that want to go into property, any property investors that want to go into property development, any HMO investors that want to go into start doing flips and start doing bigger developments. There's huge amounts of value that we give away for free every week. And we want to share it as wide as we possibly can. So if you haven't clicked subscribe, do it now. Pause the video and share it with someone that you think might get value. And Jack's got a new offer, deal under offer.
Yeah, so you might remember we got a house. I need to sneeze. No, I don't.
There we go.
You might remember we got a house under offer about 6-7 months ago on our famous street in Abingdon called Edward Street. It's where it's got a very sentimental part in our hearts because it's where we bought number 3 Edward Street, which is our first HMO. We also bought another one over the road, which we flipped. And then we also bought one up the other end of the road. So this road has only got about 50 houses on it. But we've just had our 4th property on the same road go under offer, which is crazy. But we know the buildings, we know the values, we know the construction costs, we know the floor makeups, we know that there's probably some quirks with some utilities coming from neighbouring properties. But when you get to know that sort of cookie cutter model, you can really hit them hard and negotiate well. A lot of buying property is knowing so much of the detail in such detail that you can be a bit more aggressive to pay more. And when you're comfortable doing that, you can typically pick up more stock. This one's a bit of a bigger project because it's got multiple possibilities. The one we're delivering at the moment is hopefully going to be a sui generis HMO. The first one we did is a 4-bed HMO and the middle one was a flip. So so all fun and games picking up the 4th project. We now need to get it funded. We need to get the XP surveys in, little plug, to do our measured survey as soon as possible and then start working on what we are going to do with it because it's not just a standard house. So there's going to be a few possible exits on this one. So exciting and nice. Nice to have a bit of continuity. We'll probably be hopefully starting on this one once we finish off the one up the road. So could drag the toilet down the road and we've already got our site set up there. It could be a bit of fun. I'll be sharing more details on it. But I kind of feel it's going to be some sort of mixed use HMO, maybe flip. But we don't really know if I'm truly honest. because it's got so many possibilities. I'll share Ben with it to give him a bit of a sneak peek. But yeah, stay tuned. More to come.
Nice. Cool. So, are we seeing sales? The answer is yes, but very slowly, which I think is market wide. Certainly in the southeast, I know that people are maybe having a bit more success up north and in the Midlands, but the general consensus, certainly in London, the surrounding areas, is that things are taking a lot longer to sell. Just to put things into perspective with St Andrew's Court, which is this on the top right hand side, first phase of 9 units. We launched in October last year, and we still technically now have 2 units, which we haven't had any offers on. So good news is that we have accepted recently an offer on flat 7, which is this unit with the garden on the right hand side. Flat 2 is due to exchange next week. All of flat 1, 3, 5 and 6 have already sold and they're occupied. So basically we've got these first floor 2-bed flats which are yet to sell, but we've got a lot of interest on flat 11 because flat 11 is part of phase 2 and that has a lift. So we've significantly opened up the door to downsizers, people with mobility issues. That was a big decision we made at the start of this project to make sure that of the 20 units, residential units, 6 of them don't have any lift access. That's this core here. And this core here, we have given access to 14 of the units, level threshold access, lift access. And for me, for the sake of what will be about 45 grand's worth of cost in terms of the lift, massively get that back in terms of the value of the flats within that block, having that lift access and providing that level threshold. So yes, good news. We've sort of semi-launched phase 2 now, and we are getting a lot of inquiries for that phase 2. Which is nice to see. We've got a lot more 1-beds in phase 2, which I think will fly off the shelf a lot faster because that they're at a more affordable level in terms of the sort of 200 to 250 grand level, as opposed to the 350 grand level for the 2-beds. So we're seeing sales at St Andrew's Court, but very, very slowly. Definitely not as fast as we'd have liked. We had some good news on the old maltings for this one. For those that haven't been following, we've been using an off-plan sales agent on that. We've had a few stumbling blocks with some of the legal process, which is outside of, it's our issues, not theirs, but it's having a knock-on effect with them pushing the sales as hard as we want them to. But we did have an offer accepted on one of the flats last week. So they are starting to ramp up their sales again. We've got about 6 out of the gate within about, I think it was about 3 weeks. We had 6 of the 16 under offer, which was great. But because of the delays in the legal process, we've lost at least 2 of those, maybe more actually. I think it was, which is not ideal. But we're now starting to see the sales come back through. And then we mentioned last week about on our Muswell Hill scheme having one offer accepted on the 9 flats there. A few more viewings that are happening both today and Saturday. And that site is looking, far more finished than it has previously. So I'm hoping that people can start to see the value, see the layout, see the finishes, and start to buy into that being their lovely new home. Where else have we? So Marlow, we've got we're expecting an offer on one of the larger 3-beds, which would be great to get that one shifted after a relaunch and a sort of a price reduction. And I think that's how we've had to approach it over the last couple of months. We've realized that it is more of a buyer's market out there. We have lowered the pricing on a lot of our developments by let's say 3%, which is significant. But ultimately, I think if you are in the sales market at the moment, you really need to be quite bullish and aggressive in what you're asking for. You don't want them sitting there racking up interest costs. And we've spoken about this before in terms of how XP will analyze the rate of interest and the time taken to sell a unit versus just dropping the asking price day one to a lower level and making sure that you just secure the sale, because we know that interest rates can, the interest racked up with the senior lender and your finance on a site can just cripple your profit. And every week that goes by is like, oh, how much have we lost this week? Oh, another $7,000 lost this week on profitability because of interest and delays. So selling is key. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of tie this in with the first slide, which is the risks and the macro look. Ben's given a snapshot of the micro look, and I actually feel from conversations I've had with a lot of resi agents, we're bucking the trend a little bit. We're getting sales out the door. We are being successful in that space. And I'd put that down to that we're selling new build stuff at secondhand stock value. You know, what we're selling is good value stock. When we go to our comparables, we're looking at what's sold recently, and it's typically, you know, a tired old property with an old kitchen in it. So I think we're doing quite well in that space. Looking on a macro perspective, I think not only is it a buyer's market, but I also feel that it's a very excuse-driven market. So the agent that works next door to us, they've just launched a new build site to the market probably 6 months ago, had 3 go under offer. All 3 have fallen out of bed pre-exchange because one surveyor had issues with things that shouldn't have been issues. So everyone's scared of their own shadow, and they only need a small excuse to pull out at the moment. Whereas if it was a vibrant market and there was competition and fear of loss, those excuses can be overseen and taken a view on because the people are concerned about losing the chance to acquire it. So I think it's extra important to make sure your stock's right, your pricing's right, your marketing's right, your marketing strategy's right. You're trying to combat any risks that might come up in any surveying. Make sure you get your warranties dialed down. It's very difficult to go, oh, we're a little bit concerned about this. If you go, here's your 10-year professional warranty, here's your builder control sign-off, here's all your certificates, and getting these surveyors on the right side. So I do think it is quite a tricky market, and that's around confidence. That's around, you know, do we really need to move at this moment in time? I hope the government help with a little bit more market confidence because we need it. The market needs it. If they want houses to be built, how the hell are we going to start building them if we can't sell what we were doing last year? So we need support and movement and activity in the market, and for people to be freely to move. And I'm really hoping in the autumn budget there is some form of help to buy scheme launched and some support provided for first time buyers, because it's first time buyers that typically consistently move because they're, you know, coupling up and having kids and all of that sort of stuff. So we will have to see what comes in. But at the moment, I think we're slightly bucking the trend. I think there's a lot of kudos to be said for our sort of sales consultant that's been helping us. And also a lot of time and detailed attention goes on our sales at the moment because we're in quite a heavy sales process. Whereas last year, we didn't have a lot to sell. It was 6 units. So, yeah, time and attention, because it really does need it, and that'll cost you thousands or save you thousands.
Nice. This
This is quite a technical one and a visual one, but I will try and explain it to the listeners. For just to kick things off, compounding values and compounding things is something that incrementally goes up on the value of itself every year or every month or every day. So to give you an example, if you had a 10% return on 100,000 for 10 years, you'd eventually get all of your money back. So you get 100% return over the 10 years. If you compounded that value every year, it incrementally takes your interest and principal and takes 10% of that new value every year. So it's crystallizing your new cash pot every year. And the reason I wanted to share this is compounding value is really, really strong used in the right context. So I know my mentee won't mind me sharing this because I don't have to reveal who it is. But basically my mentee, and shout out to him, I won't reveal who it is because he might get embarrassed. He's really good at flips, and he also delivers some projects that he holds on a buy-to-let perspective. That him personally doesn't really matter because this maths is what really matters for you and running a business strategy yourself. So we kind of worked out he could make a minimum of an IRR himself on 50 on his cash in his flips at about 25% per annum. His best rental, so out of all of his stock, his best rental is about 15% IRR on his cash, but there's capital appreciation focused in there. So I've said the 15% it's not really compounding because it's not really a high, 7.5 grand he's earning per year. So even though it is slightly compounding, it's not really that valuable. Whereas the capital appreciation is a compounding value. And we basically run a cash flow that if he only did flips and he only did rentals with that 50 grand, by the end of the 10th year, he'd have £465,000. Or if he kept it in a rental portfolio, he would have £206,000. And running this 10-year cash flow really enabled him to see the wood between the trees and go, actually, the flips are really good. Yes, I do have to get out of bed and find a new deal and fund it and take the risk. But that risk is worth it because the returns are so much greater. So this is strategic cash flow over 10 years between strategies. If you're running multiple strategies and you feel like you're doing 50-50 or the famous, 70-20-10, do this work out what is your best return on money and best return on time, and then make those conscious decisions. And I said to him, if you want to do a buy-to-let because you want to and you understand the numbers and you still override that to make that decision, that's cool. But you need to understand the numbers. Numbers come first, analyze the data, and then make a decision. But it just goes to show how similar returns annually, if you compound them, can make really good value. So that's basically saying if he took 50,000 into a flip every year, he would accumulate quite a significant cash pot, which is pretty cool. This is obviously just a scenario. No financial advice as always. Go do your own numbers.
Yeah, I would also say that compounding works the other way as well. So if you are taking on debt and you are bringing in more debt to pay old debt, technically there's a Ponzi scheme, but it works both ways. If you're paying a coupon on that interest every year, that depending on, I guess it depends on the structure you've got your loan agreement in, but most loan agreements will be a compounded kind of 10% return or whatever that return may be. So you are compounding the debt on that investment. So the sooner you can get that paid down, the better, because it can escalate exactly like Jack's example in the other direction, which is more positive for you guys. But just a word of warning, I guess. Yay, text. I have no idea what this is, but go on.
Shout out to Heather. I know Heather watches these episodes, so shout out to Heather. Really quick one. I was doing a post on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is quite samey. It's not as image heavy and text is very difficult to edit, but Yay Text is some random, probably Chinese website that you can tap in your text and change the formats, make it bold, make it italic, do all that sort of stuff. So Heather did it with my post the other day, and I thought, why not share it with our listeners? Because we want you guys to be the best on LinkedIn, and we're very supportive like that. So get over to Yay Text. Yay Text.
Nice.
We're not affiliated. There's no fee coming back from Yay Text. I just thought it was quite cool.
Nice, cool.
And this is another, hopefully a quick one, which just goes. We've been talking quite a lot on sales actually, so maybe there's a hashtag in there for this video. There's been a lot of sales talk, but we unfortunately are dropping the price of a property in Central Suites. But fortunately, that means we're going to sell it quicker because price normally equals sales and value, which we talked about earlier. But to reduce the price, the agent, who, by the way, does this every day, said that we should drop the price to 595. So it's currently at 650. The agent said, I recommend that you drop the property price for this property to 595. I know that pretty much 99.9% of people buy properties on Rightmove nowadays. And I had an inclination that I had heard somewhere or spoken to someone or read somewhere that it's actually really bad to market a property at 595 because then you only get exposed in the Rightmove category search between 550 and 600k, and you don't get categorized in the 600 to 650k. And it's all about bandings. A lot of people put in the bandings for their affordability, and they're going to want to buy everything that they can in their bracket, but they can't spend a penny over. And the reason that I'm sharing this, because if you can see on screen a visual, great, but I'm actually going to talk through it. So we've decided to market it at £600,000 because anyone searching between 550 and 650 get exposure to our property. So that's twice the bracket range, twice the eyes on it, and twice the likelihood of getting a viewing. And you guessed it, viewings mean sales and offers. So just a cool little tip. So just specific about pricing. And the reason that I thought this would be worthwhile to share to you guys, our listeners, property investors, property developers, is the estate agent that I worked with, who's the leading agent in this region, didn't know this. So it's all about pushing back on that, finding out what you need to do to put you in the best light. And I sent this over to the agent, and she was quite impressed. Obviously, if you are a gifted AI contributor, this is ChatGPT that's put the brain and the look scope in there. So yeah, I did get confirmation because it summarizes it better than a dyslexic trying to type a message. More efficient for them to tell me the reason why than me writing myself. Big shout out to ChatGPT always, or JackGPT as others like to refer it to as. Yeah, that would be really useful.
Nice, good, cool. We got a couple of questions that have come in over the last couple of weeks from our viewers, so thank you very much. Bartoni79, as always, amazing questions, and thanks you for tuning in so regularly and posting the questions. I actually did see in YouTube, and I need to figure out how to do it and connect it to StreamYard, which is our podcast platform. But YouTubers, if you're live directly via YouTube, they have a scorecard stroke leaderboard system for viewers. So it sort of ranks our viewers in terms of contributions, how many comments they've made, how many likes, which is really cool. But I don't know how to integrate that within StreamYard. So actually, Christina, if you're listening, can you try and figure out how can we bring that into StreamYard, and if it's possible, because that'd be super cool. Because I know a lot of you tune in regularly, which is amazing. Got a really good community here, and it would be good to kind of recognize that and maybe start having some. Having some prizes for those that do comment the most and work their way up to that leaderboard for, I don't know, like free one-to-one session with Jack and I and stuff like that. So yeah, if we can figure out how to do that for you guys, then we will. But thanks for your question. This was from I think this was from one of your Jackquisitions videos or something talking about sales processes, etc. But the question is, you mentioned you'd rather go in with a conditional offer aligned to a shorter period of time with an extension versus a longer time period of, say, 24 months. I assume as that's the time you'd expect it to take to get planning. Let's say you go in with 6 months and keep extending. Doesn't the seller become frustrated with the constant extensions, which eventually end up being 24 months anyway? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so... really good question, actually. So for people that are unbeknown but were for conditional contract, typically if you go and buy a house and you just want to buy it, that's a unconditional purchase. So you typically just condition it to searches and surveys or the contract or valuation or whatever it may be. Conditional to planning is obviously where you typically need an extension of time between exchange and completion to get the condition approved or consented or appeased. To then complete. And the query here is, why wouldn't you just push for a 24-month contract to buy yourself more time, de-risk it if you can? And the reason being is because you're much less likely to get the deal over the line. If I own a property and someone's coming in to offer a conditional contract and they could get the planning within 12 months and they're agreeing a 24-month contract, it kind of makes me think I'm not going to get those funds for 2 years. I might have a mortgage renewal, might not be able to let it out. So sort of time is everything in getting these things agreed. And I'd much rather push and stipulate a time frame on the actual application. So for an example, we have to submit planning within 3 months. We then have to complete within 3 months of approval. That typically is a long stop date, but the long stop date can be extended if the application is not approved or is appealed, for an example. Then you're only agreeing a shorter period of time, which gives you much more likelihood to get it accepted because you might be competing against someone that can bid on this unconditionally. So I thought that might be worthwhile to share. And great question, because it's not easy getting these things agreed. On to the next one. Have we got another one, Ben?
Yeah, there is. It's quite a long one, so bear with. But hopefully people find this interesting because a lot of you will be doing flips. A lot of you will be doing HMOs, buy-to-lets. So this is quite relevant. So, and a lot of you might be quite young. So this guy is 22, works in a full-time career, like enjoys it, but eventually wants to leave once the cash flow within his property business is enough to allow him to do that, basically. So looking to scale and increase on that cash flow. He's got a holding company that he owns 100% of the shares of. When I started doing two flips at once, should I run them both through the same holding company or set up separate SPVs? I'm also considering doing a flip alongside a buy-to-let to help the flips fund the refinances, so I can gradually build cash flow. I've got 2 investors interested in working with me, but they'd like to see this current flip as a proof of concept to build confidence that I can deliver a project end to end. One of the investors is open to structuring their involvement as a loan agreement where their business would supply materials directly. They would reclaim the VAT on those purchases and I'd repay the net cost plus interest. Is it better to source materials myself to avoid markups and additional VAT, especially as my holding company isn't VAT registered? Final question, since you have a lot of aggregated data on refurb costs, what would you recommend for someone new to the industry when it comes to estimating renovations? So far, I've mainly been working from online averages, such as cost per square foot for plastering, etc. So I think there's 3 parts to this, and we'll tackle the first one first, which is around setting up different SPVs for flips. And Jack, you obviously have central suites and you are primed to answer this one.
We kind of have, so there's many reasons why you set up an SPV, and it's typically like concentrated risk around that particular project and not blurring the lines across other projects, specifically other investors. So we typically, if we're doing a flip within our limited company and we don't have a JV investing partner that we're building either a business with or doing multiple flips with, we will just do it in our limited company that we own. And the reason being is because you actually end up incurring accountancy fees and all of those costs that are associated with the new entity. And that new entity, that might be £2,000 or £3,000 per year. If you're making 40 to 60K per flip, that's quite a large chunk of the profit. So most of our flips are actually done within our trading limited company, which own all of our HMOs and we do all of our stuff in. I would say if you get to the critical mass of a development over 1 million GDV, it's definitely worth doing. I would also recommend if you're doing multiple flips with one particular partner over and over again, it's probably worth doing to consolidate that risk into that limited company. I think that's kind of the advice that I would give, really. Even if we have a JV partner as an investor, we can still do it in our limited company and offer them a second charge on the asset within our limited company. So there's other bits going on. We obviously make sure that that limited company doesn't have any debentures on it, which is a typical request from most debt lenders. But yeah, good question. And we basically say if it's over £1 million, it probably warrants the fees to warrant it. If it's below that, we just keep it in our limited company. I can actually move straight on to the next one, which is alongside flips doing buy-to-lets. That's kind of what we do in our HMO business. I think buy-to-let's quite difficult to make work in the south. So if you are a little bit up north, and the yields are better, that might still work well. But I love the strategy between flips and HMOs because the cash flow from the flips runs the business and funds the deposits that stay in the HMOs or the cash left in the HMOs, whereas the HMOs are a recurring revenue where you don't need to keep finding them and funding them and taking those risks to do those deals. So I love that strategy of a bit of best of both worlds. But I would actually do that cash flow that we've just shared and the compounding value to show what returns you'd get in a buy-to-let and what returns you get in a flip, because you might find one of them performs a lot stronger and then you can put more effort into that one to build a better business model.
Cool. Next port of call was about VAT. I think my view on this is if you've got the time to be managing different procurement routes and organizing materials, your time is better spent, if I'm completely honest. I don't know what size flips you're doing and what size projects you're doing, but that VAT element is probably negligible. We don't want to take any of that risk, any of that management. So we would always just get a JCT contract in place with a contractor who just manages all of that. I think you are opening up a can of worms to be having loan agreements with an investor. They're supplying the materials. There's some sort of, I'm not really sure even how that reclaim on VAT would work. You've mentioned about kind of sourcing the materials yourself. I honestly don't, I rarely think it's worth doing, to build the relationships that your contractor probably already has in terms of trade discounts and, organizing deliveries, and if something's wrong, having to go and get more or get refunds, or something's damaged and replace it. You don't want that aggro. Just put it onto the contractor. You might be paying slightly more, but probably not a huge amount when you factor in how much time it's taking you to avoid that, to actually manage that process yourself. So I honestly don't think it's worth doing. And then final question. refurb costs, to be honest, it's going to vary so much. I don't know what area of the UK you're based in, what you do, where you do it. And every project is so different. What you need to start doing is using your own information. So making sure you're breaking down, having a cost plan of all the different elements of the project, starting off with factoring some estimates. Like you're already doing some good stuff in terms of using online averages. That's going to be a good starting point. And then as you start to work with the same contractor over and over, if that's the way that you want to work, or working with one contractor and understanding their rates, that gives you even more data to kind of put in and use. But ultimately, every contractor is different, every project is different. You can start with a budget which is based on the types of things that you're talking about, which is an absolutely great place to start. But you're never really going to know the true cost of it until you actually get quotes in and you analyze those quotes and run that analysis. So I know typically most people ask us this question and want us to give them a really robust, you should be spending this much on your kitchens, you should be spending this much pound per square foot on your fit out, it's just not as easy as that. There's too many variables in the building process, it's going to vary hugely depending on where you are in the country, who you're using, and how you're how you're project managing that delivery process.
Yeah, I actually find flips the easiest things to price, because you can actually break it down. How much does a kitchen cost? How much does the flooring cost? How much does that extension potentially cost? What does the loft conversion cost? And then you break down every line item. If we did that for our developments, it would take a week, maybe even longer. For a flip, you can kind of estimate that pretty quickly. And what I would say is I'm happy to do a deep dive on flips and costs of flips. Maybe one day when Ben's not around, I'll bore everyone with that, and this young unnamed 22-year-old can come and join and we'll see how we budget those.
Nice.
The fundamentals are, one thing I would recommend is you don't really ever know until you get a price agreed in tender. What I would suggest is if I'm doing a first flip, I would expedite the design plans pre-exchange. I would expedite getting contractors in to actually look at the project and just get them to give you a bit of an idea and a steer. Lean on a contractor. You should be able to say, roughly, I'm not going to hold you to this, but roughly what do you think this will come in at? If they say 150 and come in at 170, that's not bad, because they could have gone the other way and came in at 140. So I do think it's a good idea getting a rough idea if you can.
Cool. That's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much, as always, those that do tune in. Please share it with a few people within your property groups. We do want to share it as wide as possible. Please take the time now to subscribe and click like. And if you can leave us a review, we would be forever grateful. So have a great weekend, everyone, and see you again next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye.